mixed heritage. There are some, odd questions like the Armenians or something like this, where people who kind of exist in two realms. There always will be those things, but that doesn't mean that there isn't an obvious core stock of white people around the world that you could connect with Germanics, with Latins, with Celts, with Slavs, with Mediterraneans and Latins. There's a group of families that make up a broader race and civilization that is the white race. And I don't know that this is really a question that we need to get into. I mean, I know exactly what Mike's about to say, which is you never ask a question to a black person, are you black enough?
Is that what happens is that this question,
you can speak.
This is a question that we always get asked, and essentially what this is I'm Mike Enoch from The Right Stuff. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you don't know who I am, it's fine. My feelings aren't hurt. So this question it's essentially a purity test, and the idea of this purity test is to try and attack white identity and break down the concept of whiteness. And you don't, and I would take it more seriously if some of the people that ask this question when Black Lives Matter gives a press conference, if you said, how do you define black? How far back in the lineage do you have to go for someone to be black? There are mixed black and white people. Do you define them black, etc.? But no, it's only asked to us, and the reason it's only asked to us is because it's an attempt to attack and break down our identity. I don't think we're actually obligated to answer it, but I think Richard's answer was good. But essentially, I consider this a unfair, motivated question that is not attempting to understand our views, but is attempting to attack and break down our identity. That's what I think of the question. So, if you have yeah.
As you know, there are a lot of people who are concerned about what you and your followers espouse and do. I mean, you literally scare people. You scare children. You do. Your actions very much scare children and scare people, what happens. So my question to you is, does that make you happy? Does that jazz you? Does that excite you?
I actually seriously doubt that I scare children. But in terms
Why do you doubt that, sir? I'm just wondering.
I don't think children are going to listen to a lecture of mine and be frightened or terrified.
No, but they saw what happened in Charlottesville and places like that. So
did I do that? Really?
You personally?
Really what? That's your assumption? That I engaged in violence in Charlottesville? Did I inspire violence in Charlottesville? Is that what you're implying, sir? What are you implying then?
Go ahead, say it.
Oh, I'm happy to say it. Your words and your actions, your group's actions, scare people. And you know that to be true.
Yeah.
Did we incite violence in Charlottesville?
Who do you think incited it? That's another question. Please just answer my question.
Engaged in violence. Do I scare people? Let me answer this in an interesting way. I'm sure the alt-right does scare people because there are people who have something to lose by the current way of doing things. The alt-right is a revolutionary movement in the best sense of the word. We truly do want to change the world. We think another world is possible, and we want to bring it about. So there are people who benefit from this current regime of mass immigration and mass multiculturalism and endless wars abroad and the whole kit and caboodle of global America. And yes, they do not want a different viewpoint to be heard because we would present the world with a different way of doing things. It would be a much more peaceful world. It would be a much more meaningful world for all human beings. It would be a better and more beautiful world if people like me were in power. So there are people who benefit from the world as it is, and I'm sure they're scared. That's good. Sometimes ideas are scary. When I first read philosophy, I was scared in a way, in the sense that it was changing my mind. What? Nothing. I mean, I don't know. Why do you... You seem to... What happens to them?
What's the assumption behind your question? What assumptions are you making? No, but it seems like there's some motivated assumption. Let's fucking be honest here. What are you assuming when you ask that question? Well, where do people that aren't like you go? Their own country.
They have their own countries right now. They have their other people who don't look like me. I assume you're saying who are non-Europeans. They already have their own sovereign states. What's the issue? Are you? Am I talking to preschoolers? You just ask where? Did you literally just ask that? Where there are sovereign countries for non-white people? Are you literally don't get out much? I mean, they're already there. They have their own countries. How is this conceivably controversial?
So bad there that like it's impossible for you to conceive.
So they would stay in the United States?
Look,
white supremacists that you think it's so terrible to live in a non-white country? I mean, is there something that's so amazing about white people that you just assume everybody wants to live with us?
I don't know the question if you can answer it. It doesn't have to do with stuff. But clearly I'm white.
Okay.
And my question is, why do you guys think you can throw around the word white and then dump all white people in your ideology and your thinking?
we don't think that. You're asking bad questions. Ma'am, I'm sorry. You're just not smart enough, sir. Ma'am. Your question is actually dumb, like it really is. So I'm sorry. I would rather talk to this young woman. And the concept of an ethno-state. Well, I could explain it in two ways. There are certainly ethno-states that exist right now. The state of Israel is an obvious one. It is a Jewish state, defined. But you could even say that a state like Poland is effectively an ethno-state, even if it's not an ethno-state in the letter of its constitution, that they understand themselves as a Polish Catholics are here, and they make up the overwhelming majority of the population. That is one way of understanding an ethno-state. I have also described an ethno-state in a kind of headier way that calls upon Zionism, and that is an ethno-state for the future that would actually be open for all white people. So it would be open for Scotsmen, it would be open for Italians, it would be open for Russians and white Americans. So it would be something similar to Zionism. The Jewish state of Israel is not just a state for those people in the Middle East. It really is a state for all Jews around the world. And many Jews, perhaps most Jews around the world, understand it as such. So there are two ways. Again, there are ethno-states that exist right now, in name or without the name. But I have talked about a kind of futuristic ideal of an ethno-state for the future that doesn't exist, but could be a goal for the future that we can think about. Yes, ma'am. I think ultimately Charlottesville was good for our movement, but that doesn't mean that there weren't bad things that came along the way. Obviously, one bad thing is when anyone loses their life at what was planned to be a peaceful gathering of speeches and demonstrations. We don't want anyone to get hurt, and we certainly don't want anyone to lose their life. That was a bad thing. But another bad thing that has been underreported is the patent suppression of free speech by Mayor Mike Steiner and perhaps the governor, Terry McAuliffe. They issued a state of emergency order before the event took place, before any violence took place. And then they sent militarized police officers to clear out Lee or Emancipation Park and, in fact, force everyone there who was quite peaceful onto Market Street, where they engaged in fisticuffs and all sort of mayhem with Antifa. They did the opposite of their job. They didn't maintain law and order, and they actually inspired chaos. That was a terrible thing. But the fact is, Charlottesville was ultimately a good thing in the sense that leaders did nothing wrong. We went there to speak, and we were prevented from speaking by a terrible mayor. We learned a lesson. But the fact is, there aren't going to be just simple, easy victories. Everything's a struggle. I thought this college tour was going to be easy, that we'd call people up, and I would come and speak to students. The fact is, it has been difficult. There are roadblocks at every place along the way. And the fact that we keep moving forward, that even under oppression, we keep bringing our views to the public and communicating them with people like you, that shows that it was a victory, that we are persevering. what was the question? I think the fact that someone might be uncomfortable with someone who is talking about ideas, that seems to be actually a justification for me to be here. You know, the ideal of an academical village, as Thomas Jefferson talked about it, is not a safe space in the sense of a nursery school for young adults. It's not a place that we need to protect other people's feelings. It's actually a place where we desperately need to talk about controversial and, you could say, dangerous ideas. This is the place to do it. This is exactly the place to do it. If we can't do it at public institutions, where can we do it? And the answer to that is the internet, of course. And there is a huge amount of discussion going on that on the internet. But this has to enter the real world. We need to engage with people as humans. Yes, ma'am. Sure. I gave a speech in 2013 in which I described what could be called peaceful ethnic cleansing. I did not call for it. I was describing a historical phenomenon that was actually referencing the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, in which the map of Europe was quite literally redrawn, and it was redrawn on the basis of self-determination or ethnic determination. And so states that had actually had a historical precedent but had not existed, like Poland, came into being due to liberal elites, interestingly, who recreated these states and created things like Yugoslavia and some other states that have not gone as well. Within that was peaceful ethnic redistribution. So my point was that these kinds of things are possible. They've been done before, therefore they're possible again. And my other somewhat more ironic point was that they were actually done at the behest of the liberal elites, who will sometimes go in different directions and value other things.
On top of that, there's one other thing I'd like to add, which is that, the way you phrase that question, it makes it sound like it's this terrible thing. But as Richard pointed out, it's been done many times in history, and it's also if you recall, when the United States engaged in the ill thought out war in Iraq, many intellectuals were talking about how, well, because you have Sunni, Shiite, and Kurd, this is never going to work as a state. Iraq should be broken up, and there should be 3 independent states. Now, it didn't end up happening, but it was talked about in a serious fashion because it was understood that these three distinct groups of people simply can't get along. And on top of that, when you talk about, the way it's phrased, it sounds so terrible, and you're talking about, migrations of people and moving people. But people move all the time. People are moving in the millions into the United States and into Europe. And these are foreign people that don't know the language, the culture, the customs, and they're causing disruptions, they're causing conflict, and they're causing chaos. So the idea that people moving is like the most horrible thing is very strange. And now people move all the time. Think about it. Think about how readily you accept the idea that somebody must move because they lost their job or because the rent got too high in their neighborhood. Now, these are people moving because of capitalist greed. So what's so horrible about the idea of people moving for a better and more peaceful world?
I'm going to, we only have about 5 minutes, so keep the questions brief, and I will keep my answers brief. Who has not asked one? I'll go around here, so Al, sure. We've spent roughly $10,000 for the security and rental fees. We've obviously spent more than that in terms of travel and other costs. How much money have we raised in Charlottesville? That's private information. It's absolutely right. This is the free speech issue of our day. And I am very happy that President Fox has stood behind us and allowed this to go through. And I'm very happy with all of the security professionals and all of the administrators whom I've talked to who have been entirely professional and who understand the necessity of doing this. You cannot say that, we all love free speech, right? It's so cool. And then someone says something controversial. I'm like, ooh, that's too expensive. That is the implication of your question, whether you understand that or not. And that demonstrates to you that you basically want people to speak when they say things that are fairly boring. Yes, sir, and then ma'am. Sir? I don't know what his motivations are, but the fact is he stood behind us and allowed this to go forward. So I don't really have any major complaints. He can express his opinions. Free country. Ma'am. I won't make that determination. Certainly a lot of security is necessary because we are dealing with a violent, I can't believe I'm saying this because I was so critical of George W. Bush, violent terrorist group known as Antifa. And I do not believe that I am overstating the case by calling them that, because they explicitly talk about using violence in order to shut down speech, in order to deplatform people like me and all sorts of other people. So the fact is, we're going to have to spend money in order to combat these bad people, the Antifa, and thug elements of other groups. Ma'am? I think identity is necessary not just for white people. It's necessary for everyone around the world, and it's going to come into being due to this experience that we're all living through, which is that of mass immigration and globalization. So it is relevant to everyone. And also, it is an idea that they don't hear in class. I am bringing ideas that are not being taught in this stifling PC academic environment that we all live through, and that is a very good thing. Sir? No, not you. The person behind you. Sit down. It's Carrie. Carrie. No, Carrie. Sit down, sir. Why don't you contact Preston Wigington? Yeah, sir. I'm actually no longer banned in most European countries. I had a 3-year Schengen ban, and I'm still banned in the United Kingdom, and my last name is Spencer. It's a great irony. The fact is, we're going to have to, in a way, liberate Europe. We're going to have to liberate Europe from some of these PC laws and terrible leaders like Angela Merkel and others who are destroying Europe. It's an irony. It's a strange thing, but it is what it is. I already asked a question. Do you got a question? Oh, no, you didn't. Okay, real quick. 1 minute. I was invited by my colleague Daniel Freeberg, and I'm going to give a speech at a conference. It's going to be a lot of fun. Real quick, sir in the back, and then you. Historically speaking, yes, absolutely, this is a white country. I could give you a longer answer to that, but I'm going to refrain just simply because of time. One more question, and then I'm going to have to go. Sir, you lucked out. Sorry, I've already talked to you. You sure? Thank you. Maybe that moment was in the womb. I do think that in a way I was born this way. But in terms of articulating these thoughts, it was a long evolution over the course of my 20s. I moved from left and right in all sorts of ways in between. I wish I could get into a personal question like that, but we just don't have time. Thank you all for being here. I really do appreciate all of you. And there also is going to be a Q&A session afterwards. I would ask you to allow some students, not to hog the mic from the students. Yeah, but I'm certainly willing to talk to each and every one of you with maybe some exceptions later. So thank you for coming. I really do appreciate you. Thank you.